Take your seat, settle in, and listen up. Gophers 101 is underway and in session. It's time to go to class and talk all things Gophers.
Well, Manny, when you live on the margins in the middle of the Big Ten, obtaining bowl eligibility, not always as easy as you would want it to be. Gophers defeat Michigan State 23-20 at Huntington Bank Stadium last night. I would also say, Manny, the game had one of those feels where you snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. But as you and I talked about last Sunday, whether you win by 1 or 21, just don't lose to Michigan State. And the Gophers did not. They are 6-3. They are bowl eligible for whatever that means to you or doesn't mean to you. Still a path to winning 7 or 8 games this year. Manny, your initial thoughts here as we break down the game that was Gophers and Michigan State. And oh, by the way, I had no idea they were going to make a quarterback change. Found that out about 45 minutes before I walked in to the stadium. Interesting game, to say the least, Manny Hill.
Yeah, interesting, adventurous, quirky, weird, kind of fun, kind of frustrating at times. You know, it was a little bit of everything. You know, I know obviously you were at the game. I was able to watch from the comforts of my couch. Yeah, I think like you said, and like we said last week after the Iowa game, just find a way to win the game. You know, if it's 17-16 or 38-10, it goes in the W column nonetheless, either way, right? So I think it was just important to just find a way to win the game. It was very, very frustrating, though, I will say, from about midway through the second quarter all the way until that last drive when they tied things up at 17 to ultimately force overtime. It was getting pretty frustrating because it just felt like the offense just lost consistency and wasn't really able to get anything going throughout the game, which, you know, they had their opportunities. And, you know, we'll talk about the defense a little bit too. But I think the defense did enough, not necessarily from a statistical standpoint, because Michigan State had some big plays and they were able to move the ball a little bit. But I think the defense gave you enough opportunities to where if you just go down, find some consistency on offense and, you know, get in the end zone, you know, 1 or 2 more times, you put this game away and you don't even go into overtime. You don't have to play extra football. So that was kind of frustrating. But I think finding a way to kind of buckle down and get that touchdown scoring drive to tie things up in the final minute, and then your non-mobile you know, redshirt freshman quarterback literally scrambling you to victory in overtime was pretty exciting. So Gophers are 6-3 and they're bowl eligible, and you know, they're going into a bye week now before they have to face Oregon. So it's going to be interesting.
I think you kind of touched on a lot of the same points that I would have hit on right out of the gate, Manny, was just, again, find a way to win the game. You overcome adversity again, which is kind of becoming a trait of this team for the most part. Throw Iowa out, throw Ohio State out. Well, look at every game at home. They've pretty much battled adversity in every game at home, except for Northwestern State, in which you and I probably could have taken on Northwestern State 2-11 and found a way to probably win the football game by a touchdown. So it's good to see that. I was talking about this with friends on my way back to the car, Manny. Every time, for the most part, they've needed Drake Lindsey to go win a game, he's been able to do that, and it's come in a variety of forms. Look, they got some help. Michigan State showed in the final few minutes of the game why they are winless in the Big Ten. They gave the Gophers essentially 4 penalties, I believe, on the last drive. Starts with a kick out of bounds. I believe they had a guy lined up off sides. You get a face mask. You get a pass interference. Credit to the Gophers for scoring the touchdown. Kind of low-key love the call with the 2-yard quarterback sneak on first down or second down, whatever it was. If he comes up short, no big deal. Get back under center, try it again. It bleeds a bit more clock, because I don't know about you, Manny, when the Gophers tied the game at 17, I didn't automatically assume we were going to overtime. So Hat tip to the defense for making that happen. Encouraged, even though Drake Lindsey didn't throw a touchdown pass, he didn't put the ball in harm's way a ton. Thought there was one pass where they got a first down on that easily could have been picked off, but it wasn't. Turned into a first down for the Gophers. And then Bobby Adebaby Ichaboy, who had a nice game, was able to score a touchdown. So at the end of the day, it's so weird, Manny. We talked before we started recording, but this is the type of game where if they lose, you and I sit down and it's maddening. It's frustrating. It ranks right up there with the worst losses that PJ has ever had. But then you can flip the script because the team won the game and you can start listing off reasons why this might be good for the football team in the long run. And again, I'm not saying they're going to beat Northwestern and Wisconsin. I'd like to think they're going to beat Wisconsin. I'd like to think they'll have a chance to beat Northwestern. Hell, Manny, I'd love to think they have a chance to beat Oregon. I don't believe that, but I'll also ask you this and flip this to you, Manny. Imagine losing tonight and having 13 days, or excuse me, last night, having 13 days to think about losing to Michigan State before you take on Oregon. So I don't know if that will mean anything in the long run, but I'd rather be going into a week off and taking on Oregon at 6-3 versus 5-4. And in a scenario that you laid out a few weeks back, Manny, starting to think, are we going to have to beat Wisconsin just to get to 6-6 and go to a third tier bowl game? Well, now they've avoided that. And now there's a chance you win 7 or 8 games. You might wind up playing somewhere pretty cool. Again, that means something different to everybody. I'd rather see them in a bowl game than not. I'd rather have it be the best destination possible. But a path to 7 or 8 wins sounds pretty nice to me as we record this podcast on November 2nd.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly I think having the bye week next week gives you an extra week to kind of prepare for an Oregon team that you're really going to be up against. But, you know, and look, and I think we're seeing that Indiana is pretty good and they are worthy of that number 2 ranking that they have right now. And we saw what they did yesterday against Maryland, just ran circles around the Terrapins. So Indiana going into Oregon, going into Eugene and beating the Ducks, really impressive. And not saying the Gophers would definitely repeat what Indiana did because Indiana's a much superior football team. But I think it shows that I think you've got a chance to at least go into Eugene and compete and maybe make things a little bit interesting. If you play your best football, you put your best foot forward, maybe some calls go your way and you find yourself in a position where you're competing. And if you still lose, you're still feeling pretty good about yourself. And then you go into that Northwestern game with more confidence. And then maybe you play well against Northwestern and you win that game. Northwestern's certainly better than I thought they were going to be this year. But that's not a team that's unbeatable. And you can go into Evanston in that little small lacrosse stadium that they're playing in right now. And
Wrigley.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, Wrigley.
It's at Wrigley. I keep forgetting that it's at Wrigley. But either way, like Northwestern's much better than we thought, but that's still not a team that you can't beat, that you have no chance against. So I think if you can find a way, you got 2 weeks to prepare for Oregon. You go in, you compete well against the Ducks, and even if you come up short, you're still feeling good about yourself. Then you can go into, hopefully that translates into Wrigley Field the next week after that. And then if you find a way to win that game, now you're 7-4, the last game of the season against Wisconsin, against a team that's really inferior to you. And I can't remember the last time where we looked at a Wisconsin-Minnesota football game and thought, oh, yeah, the Badgers are clearly the inferior football team, even like going in. Now, sometimes we see it as the game plays out. We're thinking, oh, yeah, Wisconsin's not quite as good. But this is a situation where the Gophers being at home should be favored to win that game, and they should win that game. And if you're 7-4 going into it, you get yourself to 8-4. That's impressive stuff for BJ Fleck. So it's a long answer, but it's like, I think that's why winning the game last night against Michigan State is so important, because it can have a domino effect on how the rest of your season can play out.
Well, Manny, don't ever apologize for a long answer, long-winded, because we know that I can take the cake there. I think if we want to extrapolate out what we saw between the Gophers and Michigan State, and again, do the old, what lessons can we learn or what can be applied to taking on Oregon? Well, one of the great failures against Michigan State, the head football coach always says, and a lot of college football coaches say this, start fast, accelerate in the middle, finish strong. Well, I think the Gophers did two of the three. They didn't accelerate in the middle. You have a Brady Denneberg missed field goal late in the first half. Coming out of the half, Michigan State, I don't want to call it a fluke touchdown, but they get a little bit of a break on a 71-yard touchdown pass. And at that point, Manny, I hate to put this out there, but it is kind of the classic Minnesota Gophers game where you go, boy, we kind of should have been leading this game comfortably 17-0, but before you know it, it's 10-7. And Michigan State looks incapable, but suddenly, they get a turnover, something fluky happens, they're winning the game. Those are things that I just don't think the Gophers can afford going forward,
right?
Especially against Oregon and Northwestern. We'll see about Wisconsin. I am still awfully nervous, even though I agree with you, to put words like inferior out there when talking about Wisconsin, because I know how catatonic I will be the following day if Minnesota loses to Wisconsin this year.
But that's the point, though. The fact that Wisconsin is not a good team this year, you should be apoplectic if they lose that game.
Yes.
You're well within your right to feel that way if they don't lose. They absolutely should win that game. And if they don't, honestly, I don't even care if you beat them 13-9. I don't care.
Yes.
Do not lose that game. Period.
Yeah, you can't.
End of story.
You can't. They might have already fired a head coach and they might still be winless in the Big Ten at that point. Actually, no, they were off yesterday. Is that wrong that I can't even tell you what? That's how far off our radar Wisconsin is, Manny.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you what they did yesterday.
I think they were off.
They were off.
Okay, they're home against Washington next week.
That's no picnic. Washington's a pretty good
Washington at Indiana, home against Illinois before they play the Gophers. So
think about that, Manny. Wisconsin is so far off my radar. I couldn't even tell you what they did.
Maybe they could beat Illinois at home because that's kind of Illinois is a good team and they're well coached by Brett Bielema, but that has the potential to be kind of a weird game that maybe just Brett Bielema revenge against Brett Bielema kind of motivates the program. I don't know. That could be a potential win for them. But yeah, I mean, it's all signs are pointing to Wisconsin being winless in Big Ten play going into that last game.
If you're a Badgers fan, I think you're looking at the Gophers as maybe the next most winnable game. Any game they play at home, they're going to have a chance, even though they've been absolutely boat raced at home, but by really good competition. So to your point, maybe they'll end up winning a game here and there. But you're right, Manny. The University of Minnesota, for better or worse, maybe it says more about how far Wisconsin has fallen and maybe not as much about how far Minnesota has risen, that we're talking about you should just show up and beat Wisconsin. We'll talk about Wisconsin when we get there. What did you think of Drake Lindsey's performance yesterday against Michigan State? I thought it was very workmanlike, kind of ho-hum. I actually thought Michigan State was better defensively than I had been led to believe or that I had seen in other games. Some of that may have just been, it didn't feel like the Gophers receivers were getting a ton of separation. I'd have to defer to people who are far smarter than me if that was something schematically that maybe Michigan State switched up or maybe they just had a better game. But again, for the most part, Manny, he really didn't put the ball in harm's way. Now, he didn't throw for a touchdown pass, had a few opportunities maybe, but he took care of the ball, moved the offense up and down the field when they had to. But definitely, Manny, just late second quarter into the third quarter, that's the part that I didn't like was, and it's not all on him, but there was just no rhythm offensively.
Yeah, there were a couple of like missed throws and things like that, kind of in that middle part of the game, end of the first half, start of the second half, that kind of most frustrating stretch of the game. But I think overall he was fine. I don't think he was great. I don't think he was particularly good. I think he was fine, and I think adequate enough for them to obviously. I mean, they won the football game, so what he did in the game was obviously enough. But I will say, and these are, we talked about the sort of the ebbs and flows and the peaks and valleys of starting a young quarterback, who, granted, he got a chance to sit behind Max Brosmer and watch a lot last year, and he got into a couple of games last year, but for all intents and purposes, he really had next to no experience going into this season, and that was a big talker going into it. And so, we're kind of seeing the peaks and valleys of starting a young quarterback that doesn't really have a lot of experience. But I think, Oregon aside, those other 3 games or the other 2 games after the Oregon game to kind of finish things up, I think are going to be really important in terms of just, can we see some of the maturation process with Drake Lindsey kind of play out over the course of the Northwestern game. We talked about it. Western game is going to be easy. They're certainly a formidable opponent, but can we see him go into that game and just play well and make enough plays and make enough throws for them to win that game? Wisconsin's a team that's just kind of a mess right now. Can he take advantage of that, when that game comes up? Oregon's going to be tough because that's just a team that is so much better than them that, I think if we just see him play solid enough in that game, I think that's a good sign against, a Dan Lanning defense that is always ready to go. So, as far as like yesterday and the outlook for the rest of the season, I think it's just a matter of wanting to see him continue to make strides. I thought he did some good things in the game yesterday, but I think it was also a sign of like, we need to see a little bit more, because I'm not sure yesterday's performance is going to be, certainly it's not going to be good enough to beat Oregon. And I'm not sure it's going to be good enough to beat Northwestern either. So I think we're going to need to see him kind of perform a little bit better, step up a little bit more, find a little bit more consistency. And it's not all on him. Part of that falls on, Harbaugh as well as a play caller, PJ as the head coach, the offensive line, the running game, which was pretty solid with Ichiboy yesterday, needs to continue to be solid to help him out too. But I think, seeing some continued growth and development in Drake Lindsey, I think is going to be vital for the finish of the season.
Yeah, Ichiboy, 49 of his yards came on 1 carry, but he still runs for over 100 yards, 108, has 1 touchdown. One thing I'll give Drake Lindsey credit for, he's not afraid to distribute the ball. Maybe today it was maybe slightly a bit too check down heavy, but you have to take what you get. Threw passes to 8 different receivers, or 8 different players caught passes today. I think what I'm really looking forward from Drake Lindsey is, against Oregon specifically, can you just look a little bit more comfortable? He has not played well on the road, and that makes a ton of sense. And the road games that they've asked him to play outside of Cal, not super comforting environments. It's not the 12,000 people on the lake at Northwestern, and it's not 13,000 people in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. So I certainly understand where that would come from. But can you look more comfortable against Oregon offensively? So then the following week, when 7 or 8 days later, you go take on Northwestern, I think it would be really nice to win a road game. If they don't beat Oregon and they don't beat Northwestern, they will go winless on the road this year. It's also entirely possible they go undefeated at home, which would actually kind of be a weird anomaly. We'll see. There's obviously still 3 games to be played. But I want to see that. To your point, Manny, I think you want to continue to see him grow, and grow comes in many different ways. He doesn't have to throw for 340 yards and 3 touchdown passes at Oregon. That's not what I'm saying. But to your point, Manny, I want to win the game. I liken this like the Ohio State game. Coaches all week long they're going to plan whatever they think is their best game plan to try and win the game. And they absolutely should. I'm not sure how realistic that is. Just for fun, we can play, what does the ESPN matchup predictor say, which probably says like 92% Oregon. I don't know. But I do just want to see him start to look or continue to look more comfortable, because if you are, let's again play this out. Theme of the podcast so far. If you're going to get to 8-4 and beat Northwestern and Wisconsin, he's going to have to play some of his better football to do that.
Yep. 100%.
Logically, Wisconsin will come ready to play. You would think they would. Weather probably won't be super great, probably somewhere between 15 and 30 degrees. So he's going to have to take care of the ball. And Northwestern, you're going to have to score some points likely to beat them at Wrigley Field. So I don't want to say we've seen him regress, because he hasn't, but we've just kind of seen some of that. Oh yeah, this is a redshirt freshman quarterback. It's not always going to be pretty. It wasn't last week against Iowa. It was better today in the two categories that matter the most. He led the team to victory, and he didn't turn the ball over. So by and large, I'm fairly happy with where he is at. I think defensively, Manny, and even on the offensive line, I know we've kind of beaten the dead horse on this. It just kind of is what it is. I don't think the defense was perhaps as bad as the numbers would show. I know Michigan State, I think, ended up pushing 500 yards of total offense. But I think some of that, now this is, again, talking out of both sides of our mouths, which we love to do. They made a lot of good plays and made Michigan State work for a lot of their offense, but they also gave up just 3 egregious chunk plays to Michigan State, largely because of being out of position and missed tackles. And they all came at awful times. And you just can't have that. And that is what scares me the most about taking on a team like Oregon in 2 weeks with supreme elite talent. If you are having mistakes like that, and again, if you're having trouble running the football, which I wouldn't say was a huge issue last night for the Gophers, but again, most of their yards came on, or a good chunk of their yards came on one play. I just think those are the things where at this point, again, Manny, they might have a really nice game where you go, wow, that's the defense we're used to seeing. They looked great tonight. And wow, it was great to see the Gophers run for over 200 yards against Northwestern. But that is the exception to this season. It is definitely not the rule. And we've seen that again in the past few games since the defense looked so good against Nebraska and the offensive line looked so good. They've definitely, I don't even know if regressed is the word. They're just back to kind of what we think they are.
Yeah. And, when you play Oregon in 2 weeks, I mean, the other part of this is in yesterday's game, Michigan State committed 10 penalties in the game. And that, some of them really aided you offensively to get you in positions to get the tying score and all of that. Oregon is not a team that commits a lot of penalties. I was looking it up as you were talking there. They've committed, it looks like 38 penalties in 8 games. So just over 4 penalties a game. That's not really a lot. So the likelihood that Oregon's just going to be this complete undisciplined football team that's going to give you a bunch of opportunities, I mean, that the likelihood of that is really, really low. And so I think it's going to be important for them, certainly offensively, to find a rhythm. And again, you're going to have 2 weeks to prepare. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win the game, but I think that is going to give you a better chance to really compete and try and stay in the game as long as you possibly can. If this was a situation where they had to go out to Eugene on a short week and, I think they would go into that game and be completely overmatched. They might be overmatched anyway, either way. But I think having this bye week, give some of these guys a chance to kind of rest their bodies for a week and sort of heal up a little bit so that they can be at their absolute best, because for them to have any chance, I think, to even compete, let alone win, they're going to need to be at the top of their game. And that means, don't commit any penalties that hurt you. And the Gophers, for the most part, have not been a team that is, I think they've got fewer penalties than Oregon does have this year. So that's the one really amazing thing about this team, is that they don't commit a lot of penalties. And so, if you take advantage of this bye week, rest up, have an extra week of preparation for Oregon, I think that gives you a chance to go in and compete and kind of learn from some of the mistakes and some of the things that need to be cleaned up after you kind of had to kind of scratch and claw your way to a win against Michigan State like yesterday?
Well, it's definitely more difficult to do because you're on the road at
Yep.
Oregon, but the defensive line is just going to have to be the defensive line that you saw in the first half, where they had 5 or 6 sacks in the first half against Michigan State. And some of that was just young quarterback holding onto the ball too long, but you still get credit for making the big plays and making the sacks. And the defensive line that got 9 sacks on Raiola a few weeks back, you're going to need that same defensive line, not even Manny, to beat just Oregon. I think to go on the road, technically a road game, although we've talked about this before, I think there'll be a lot of Gopher fans at Wrigley. You're going to have to get pressure on the quarterback, and it's slightly more difficult on the road. You typically don't get quite the jump, but that's going to have to be a factor, and the defense is going to have to make turnovers. And I want to be clear about this. I know not everybody loves when we talk about automatically assuming that the team is going to lose the game. I'm going to watch the game and hope that they win it. I'm not cheering for I'm not cheering for them to lose it. I just think you said it perfectly. They're just going to be up against it. It's a difficult environment against a really good team. One of a few games that night under the lights on a Friday. If you're looking for bright side, Manny, and things that maybe matter but also don't matter, one thing I do like about this, as much as I despise Friday night football, I do like that the Gophers will get home a day earlier before they have to turn around and go on the road again, albeit same time zone in Chicago. I do like that you'll have one extra day. Maybe that plays out, because at this point, I'm looking at the final 3 games, and for as bad as the game in Iowa was a week ago, if this team goes 8-4, I'm just not going to be super upset at the end of the year. I'm not, because
how could we be?
Correct.
How could we be upset about it? Yeah.
I didn't envision they could win 8 games. I thought they could win 7 at best, 6 or 7. So if they go 8-4, I think most logical people should be happy with this season. And I think at this point, that should be the goal. Get to 8-4. At the very least, get to 7-5 and beat Wisconsin at the end of the year. And you know what? Any year you beat Wisconsin is a good year, assuming that the Gophers can do just that.
I want to say this very quickly about Wisconsin too, and I don't want to look too far ahead. Obviously, that game is not till November 29th. I was just looking at Wisconsin's scores for, they're 2-6, 0-5 in the Big Ten.
They can't score.
They have scored more than 17 points one time this year. And that was a 42-10 win against Middle Tennessee.
Yeah.
Their 2 highest scoring games, 42 points against Middle Tennessee, and they won 17-0 against Miami, Ohio on August 28th.
But Manny, I'll tell you, that terrifies me, because it's just classic. And I'll be honest, I do this to myself, but it's classic Gopher fandom. You tell me that, and the first thing I think of is, well, yeah, but teams have been gashing this defense all year. What if that's the one day that Wisconsin shows up and scores 31 points? That is still the predicament that I worry about with this Gophers team, is that there are prolonged stretches of times or entire games where they can't stop anybody.
Yeah.
So that's why the game still matters. It's not a foregone conclusion that the Gophers are going to beat Wisconsin.
I think you're 100% right. And I think, as it's the old cliche of, that's why they play the game. You still have to play the game, and you still have to go out and execute, because Wisconsin's not just going to lay down for you. It's a bad team, a team that has struggled to score, but it's still a rivalry game for one of the oldest trophies in college football. That team is still going to show up and play with some pride and want to compete and play hard. Especially, I think, if they are being led by a different head coach by then.
Yes.
I think they're especially going to want to show up and play. I'm just saying, to me, if you lose that game, and if that's the game, if you lose that game, and I don't care what you've done against Oregon and Northwestern leading up to that game, if you lose that game against that team that has scored more than 17 points one time this season, and you lose that game at home, You deserve to be ripped from limb to limb by Manny Hill and Ross Brendel on Gophers 101 the next day, and by most of the fan base, I would say too.
And it's also early November, and they've scored more than 17 points one time. Hey, can the special teams whisperer weigh in really quickly?
Yeah, let's do it.
Tom Weston has had a rough last few weeks. Yeah. He was pretty good. He was pretty good today. 7 punts, 5 inside the 20. He had almost 296 yards of punting. I hate to be this guy. Gophers probably don't win that game if he doesn't have a great day punting. They also probably don't win the game if Michigan State kicker doesn't kick the ball out of bounds at the most inopportune, worst time. So thank you, Michigan State, for that. And Manny, Michigan State showed at the end of the game why they're now 0-6 and winless in the Big Ten, 3-6 on the season. They did everything, and you talked about it, Manny. The last 2 drives of the game, again, credit the Gophers for holding on to the football, working down the field, scoring the touchdowns. I'm not taking anything away from the Gophers. They won the game. They're 6-3. Great. But Michigan State did everything you would expect a bad football team to do to lose a game they absolutely should have won. It feels a little bit like the Purdue game. But again, the Gophers do not have to apologize for anything. At the end of the day, they waited out their opponent. They have more points on the scoreboard, and they won the game. But yeah, Michigan State, it was 467 total yards of offense, which is about, 166 more than the Gophers had.
Yeah. Your quarterback, the quarterback threw for 311.
Yes, yeah.
And as a team, you ran for 156 yards. And by the way, it was only 156 yards because of the 7 sacks that the Gophers were able to get on defense. So, I mean, Tao Tolliver ran for $127 on 11 carries. Now it was obviously he had a one big long run that boosted that a bit. But again, if you're the Gophers defense, those are the things you got to try to avoid. You got to avoid giving up the big plays. And there were a few big plays on the ground, through the air as well, that really kind of was able to boost Michigan State a little bit offensively. You've got to clean that up because if you don't, Oregon's a team with Dante Moore at quarterback that's capable of making plays like that throughout an entire game. We saw Ohio State do it. We even saw Iowa do it a little bit. So I think this game, the Gophers have to look at, don't apologize for the win. You won the game. You're 6-3 to your point, 4-2 in the Big Ten. That's a nice start to the Big Ten season. But you've got to take this game and you've got to look at what you did wrong. And you've got to, for these next 2 weeks, as you prepare for Oregon, you've got to try and clean a lot of those things up.
It's one of those games that coaches love, right? We won the game, but I still have plenty of things I can coach up and try and coach to get better. So that will be what PJ Fleck has to look forward to. I know coaches love to go out. They'll use this time to do some extra recruiting, but also I know they'll probably do a little extra game planning and scheming for definitely Oregon, but even looking ahead to Northwestern and Wisconsin.
Can I add one more thing too?
Yeah, because I got one more to add before we do some Manny Mania.
You're at the game, so I don't know if you caught PJ's on the field interview after the game.
I caught the very end that's on social. I've not, and I'm going to get to the next thing that I'm going to get to. You'll have to help fill me in on. I typically, games that I'm at, I go back and skim through them. I have not done that yet. This is early Sunday morning. By the way, the extra hour of sleep felt nice. That was great. So I have not gone back and watched the entire thing, but it sounded like he was his typical, in a good way, crazy self.
It was typical PJ, but he snuck in a little bit. He kind of mentioned the offense having some struggles in the middle of the game. He snuck in Joe Rossi knows our offense really well, and just all of that. And I got to tell you, Ross, we heard those same excuses, not necessarily from PJ last year after the Rutgers game, but I was seeing some fans kind of say, "Oh, well, that's sad. The coaching staff, they know the Gophers really well." I don't like using that as an excuse as to why you're struggling offensively, because to me, especially in the case of yesterday's game, you're going up, Joe Rossi does know your offense really well. But you know what else, PJ? You know Joe Rossi's defense very well. That's not an excuse. I don't want to hear that. I get it. You want to give your former defensive coordinator some credit, and Joe Rossi did a really nice job with the defense when he was the defensive coordinator here, particularly in 2019. I just don't, I just don't like that. I don't like to hear that because to me, it's like, PJ, you're still a head football coach, and you still have to try and put your best foot forward on offense. Your former colleague being on the other side of the field is not an excuse for you going 2.5 quarters without being able to move the football. That's not a good enough excuse for me. So I just have to throw that in there because he kind of threw that in there in his post-game interview, and it's just like, come on, PJ, don't do that. I don't want to hear that.
Well, you came back with exactly what I would say. You also know his defense. So
right.
What's the old Nick Bakay line when he was doing over-unders on ESPN
Advantage
back
push.
in the day? Yeah, before.
Advantage push.
Yep, exactly. Advantage push. It should be a net neutral. My thing, and you can fill me in on this a bit, is in overtime we have the pass interference flag, which was not pass interference at all. Nobody touched anybody. And that flag gets picked up, and I know replay assist can't legislate calls. But my hunch, Manny, on replay assist, I'm going to guess head official guy got buzzed and said, hey, I'm not telling you to pick up that pass interference flag, but you guys should probably huddle and pick up that pass interference flag. That almost had to be what happened because they moved the ball, they marked it, they were ready to start play, and then they're like, after talking with the crew, it's not pass interference. Manny, you could see at the stadium and on the replay, nothing resembled pass interference. At first, I thought maybe they got the call wrong and he was calling holding. I'm like, I could buy that I missed a little bit of holding as he was running
because
down the field.
He was tugging on the jersey a little bit. Yeah.
But there's no pass interference at all. So my hunch, I don't know if the broadcast covered it, but my hunch is almost that had to be the old replay assist guy. Oh, and by the way, burn this tape because I didn't tell you that. I mean, but that's almost what it had to be.
Yeah.
Because it was such an egregious missed call.
Yeah. I think in that situation, I think the Gophers got a huge break there. I don't think it was pass interference. I thought holding it, Kerry Brown got a good tug on the jersey there. I think the way the rules analyst that was in the booth or, on the broadcast basically said there was a tug, there was a pull on the jersey, but it didn't really impede the progress of the receiver. So, you just kind of, it's not pass interference. I agree with you. I don't think it was pass interference, but I thought you could have made an argument for calling holding there on Kerry Brown.
Well, and that's kind of what I thought they were going to say is after discussion, it's a holding. It's not, pass interference. So that would change the ball a little bit. They're also lucky, Manny, in the sense that almost never happens. It does happen where every now and then you get the after crew discussion, but it just doesn't happen all that often. It's a footnote in the game, but it directly ended up perhaps being the reason why you won the game because Michigan State kicked a field goal and then you scored a touchdown.
And I will say this too. I don't know how many of the replays that you saw on Drake Lindsey's touchdown to win the game.
Yeah.
They called it a touchdown. They looked at they reviewed the play. They didn't overturn the call. I'm not 100% sure that that the football crossed the plane before his foot touched down out of bounds. And now his right foot came down out of bounds and kicked the pylon over. It's hard to really tell, it's a bang bang play and it's hard to tell with the angles if the ball was actually across the line. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying I'm not 100% sure. And that was kind of a big deal because it's 4th and goal at the 1-inch line if that call is overturned. So there would have been an interesting situation. Obviously, they called it a touchdown. They reviewed it. They didn't overturn it. The Gophers win. I'm not going to complain about that. But if you go back and watch the replay, it is kind of an interesting situation where it's like, did he get in? I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I think it's the old, if they would have said it's 4th and short, I think they would have upheld 4th and short. I looked at it. I don't know. Maybe I'm being Homer pie in the sky guy here. My hunch is that a smidgen of that football is over the line, but I don't
How do you know?
I
How do
don't
you
really
for
know.
sure? Yeah.
And I don't even know how they know. And people always talk about, well, what if we start microchipping the footballs? A, I still don't know how practical that is. B, would that even be exact? I mean, how does one little and again, this will show how tech naive I am. Somebody can explain to me in the comments. How would one little microchip know exactly where every inch and corner of the football is? I guess
Right.
I'm not quite sure how that would work. But
Well,
then again,
it's a tough situation because on the what should have been the perfect camera angle to be able to tell, well, the line judge or the line official was right there, and his head was like blocking a big part of the pylon and blocking where Drake Lindsey's.
you're
I
not
told
the
you I was going
first
to
to
do that.
do that.
I,
You're
I
not the
told you I was going
first.
to do this all the time, but his head was kind of blocking where Drake Lindsey's foot came down out of bounds, so it was kind of hard to tell. I'm just saying where it looked like his foot may have came down, it looked like the ball was short. But again, there's not enough, I think they looked at it and said, there's not enough evidence here to overturn this. We're just going to leave it as it is. It's a touchdown. The Gophers win. I'm not going to complain or rip the officials for it.
Do you know why it is big, though? I mean, I would venture to guess if it's 4th and 2 inches, they probably snap it to Drake Lindsey and he probably gets in.
Yeah.
However, they have also had a really tough time in short yardage situations this
Yeah.
year. So that's not a guarantee. I know he had the 2-yard sneak the drive before, but yeah, I'm
And
happy.
do you really want to go into a second overtime in that
No.
situation and kicking a field goal,
Correct.
kicking a chip shot field goal? And
So I think they're going for it. So I
Yeah.
think they would. I think they
Yep.
would have went for that one, and I'm glad we didn't have to see that because again, at the end of the day, I would rather, as a fan, be celebrating a victory where my team grinded a game out and they're 6-3 versus being 5-4. Manny, it's been a little while. We're gonna close this with a little Manny Mania where I just trivia you. I give you trivia. I've really struggled to talk today. I trivia. Oh my gosh. Let's take a break. I quiz you, Manny, on Gopher football teams of the past. And during the basketball season, we're going to do this for basketball as well. Because, yes, we are going to talk hockey and basketball at some point. Although, Manny, I don't know how much you've been paying attention. At this point, there's not a lot to talk about with the Gopher hockey program. So we'll save that.
Yeah, we'll skip that for now.
We'll save that for a week or two, and hopefully Nico will give us some non-conference wins we can talk about. The 2017 Gophers are what we're closing with today, Manny, as I hopefully can battle my way through this without tripping up over words again. They went what that year? Their overall record was what?
PJ Fleck's first year as head coach, they went 5-7.
They did, and what did they do in conference play?
I want to say they went like...
If you do the math, you think you can figure it out pretty easily.
I think we were playing 9 Big Ten games by then, right?
That is correct.
So I would say they went 2-7.
They did. They beat Illinois, I believe, in overtime, 24-17, or maybe it was just late. And then they beat Nebraska.
Was that on the road in Illinois? Was that on the road?
That was at then TCF Bank Stadium.
Okay.
And then they beat Nebraska 54-21, as they are wont to do. Manny,
I remember that.
Who led the 2017 Gopher football team in passing yards?
That's what's his name? Was that Connor Rhoda?
That was Connor Rhoda.
Manny Durham Hall quarterback, yeah.
Manny, he passed for 839 yards that season. Demery Croft passed for 674 yards.
Yeah, I remember that last game against Wisconsin at TCF Bank Stadium with Demery Croft at quarterback, and that was
I don't want to remember
ugly.
it. I don't want to remember it. What was I think the final was that 55 30
No, I think
31 nothing.
31 nothing. Yeah, it was a shutout. I remember it was a shutout. It was 31 or 34 nothing, something like that. Yeah.
Demery Croft threw 4 touchdowns and 7 interceptions that year. Do you want to venture to guess how many touchdown passes Connor Rhoda had?
I'll say I'll say he had 9 touchdown passes.
He had 5 touchdown passes.
Wow.
It's kind of remarkable that
was
team.
That was a rough year.
It's kind of remarkable that team went 5-7. The Gophers had one running back run for almost 1,000 yards in 2017. Who was it?
I'm gonna need a minute for this.
Somebody.
Was that Mo?
That was not Mo.
But Mo was on the team, wasn't he? He was on the team that year, right?
I am not showing him on the 2017 team.
Mo Ibrahim was not on that team. Okay. Wow.
He would score a touchdown and he would do this.
I don't remember.
This is shocking to me.
Yeah, because that was a tough. I just remembered, like, there was excitement going into the year because of PJ Fleck, his first year and everything, but you kind of get about halfway through and you're just like, yeah, this team is not good.
They were a tough watch, and it was Rodney Smith who ran for 977 yards.
Rodney Smith. Okay.
Here's one for you, though. Out of the backfield, and maybe you'll struggle with this one too, who had the most rushing touchdowns in 2017?
So I'm going to say it wasn't Rodney Smith.
It was not Rodney Smith.
I think who the other running backs would have been. Because
if
Mo wasn't on that team,
what's crazy here, Manny, is this is 2017, which is 8 years ago, and this is just not a very memorable team.
Yeah, because it was such a nondescript year. I mean, you just it's kind of like it reminded me a lot of like Glenn Mason's first year in '97 with the Gophers, where they went 3-9. They had that loss to Hawaii to start the year, but you just don't really remember a lot about that team because they just weren't good, and it was such a transition year with a new coach. That's how this kind of feels in 2017. It was such a transition from Tracy to PJ, and that team was just not very good. And we got to the point late in the year where they just weren't very competitive in very many games.
Well, they ended up, Manny, that year being outscored. What would it have been? 70-0 at the end of the year. They lost to Northwestern 39-0, and then they lost to Wisconsin 31-0. Kobe McCrary had 8 rushing touchdowns that year.
I don't even remember Kobe McCrary. All due respect to him, I don't even remember that guy.
Kobe is watching this podcast somewhere going, "You, Manny Hill."
I apologize, Kobe. I'm very sorry, man. I don't remember him being on that team, let alone leading the team in rushing touchdowns. Wow.
Here's one I think you'll get right. Who led the 2017 Gophers in receiving yards?
Was that TJ? Was that Tyler Johnson?
That is Tyler Johnson.
Yeah.
Now we're going to play one of my favorite games where we scan what was not a great defense, and we look at some of these paltry stats, what might make you laugh. Although, was it the last one we did, Manny? We had a combined like only 8 interceptions, and it was 8 different players who had 1 interception. This time around, it's a little bit different. The team as a whole had 8 interceptions, Manny, but it only came from, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different guys. The leader had 3 interceptions. Do you have any idea who had those 3 interceptions?
This is a struggle, man. This team is
We have found your weakness.
Yeah.
It's not
2017 Gophers.
It's not Super Bowls. It's not early 2000s Gophers. It's the 2017 5-7 Golden Gopher football team. I'll tell you this. It was not Thomas Barber, because that may have been your default answer.
Eric Murray wasn't still on that team.
He was not.
I think he had gone on to the NFL. He's probably playing for the Houston Texans by then. Um, gosh. Well,
Are you stumped again?
well, I want to see now. I kind of want to say no, but see, I was gonna guess Antoine Winfield Jr., but I feel like Antoine had a year where he got injured after like 2 games or something and missed the rest of the year, and he got like a medical red shirt or something. So I want to say it wasn't him.
You're going to want to avoid that, and you're going to think, oh boy, I can't even give you a hint. Rhymes with Puff. Jacob Huff with 3
Jacob Huff.
interceptions.
Okay.
Here's your
Wow.
final one.
Who led the team in sacks?
Combined tackles, by the way.
Combined tackles.
Pretty good number.
Who led the team in combined tackles?
Are you asking me?
Well, I might as well ask at this point. I'm just gonna guess. I know I'm gonna be wrong. I'm gonna guess Antoine Winfield Jr.
It's Thomas Barber.
It is Thomas Barber.
Yep.
Okay.
He had 115 combined tackles. By the way, that year, I'm not going to quiz you on this. Not one of our guy Emmett Carpenter's better years. He only went 14 for 20 on field goals. But
now that you're done asking me questions, I'm going to look that team up now.
This is, you know what? It's good for all of us to see Manny Hill be humbled. Proof he knows almost everything, but he doesn't know the 2017 Gopher football team. But why would
that team beat Nebraska 54-21? Was that like just a really bad Nebraska team?
I think Demery Croft ran all over them. He had like a 70 or 80 yard run up the middle. That was just not a great night.
I do remember what allowed me to get the Tyler Johnson question right was I remember the game at Oregon State where he had like a really long touchdown. He had like a 60-yard touchdown or something in that game.
Okay.
So that's kind of what made me think about him for like leading the team in receiving. But yeah, other than that, the only games that I really remember from that year, Ross, was the Oregon State game and just how abysmal that Wisconsin game was at the end of the year. Those are the only things I really remember about that team that year, because that was just not a very it was clear with that season. It was clear that PJ had some work to do to just kind of really revamp the program, because it was coming off we don't have to go into the situation that happened in the 2016 season, a season in which they won 9 games, but it was, they were transitioning away from Tracy Claeys and going into this new era, PJ Fleck, and there was just a lot of work that PJ had to do to kind of really get the program going in the proper direction. So it was very much, well, and didn't he even say like that, what he called that like year 0 or something like that? Yes. Didn't he say something like he called 2017 year 0?
Yes, 2017 was year 0. So for about the first 3 or 4 years PJ was at Minnesota, the joke was always, is this year 2? Is this year 3? What is this if the first year was year 0? But you'll remember, Manny, 2018, at one point, the team was just kind of stuck in the middle, not doing a ton, and they actually won 3 of their final 4, beating Wisconsin for the first time in 3 presidential administrations. And that was
they fired Rob Smith, the defensive coordinator, because they had gotten torched at Illinois and torched at Nebraska. And so now that I'm bringing this stuff up, you probably don't want to test me on 2018 Gophers, because 2018 Gophers I do remember quite a bit.
I'll tell you what, Manny, you will get the 2018 Gophers when the algorithm says you will get the 2018 Gophers. Instead, you will go to bed tonight defeated and beat down that the 2017 Gophers. Actually, you know what? You'll probably sleep better because you don't have to think about the 2017 Gophers, because they don't even live in your head. But we're celebrating the 2025 Gophers, 6-3, bowl eligible, still with a path to, I believe, avoiding Detroit after Christmas Day, which I think should be the goal every year. It's not just being bowl eligible, it's avoiding going to Detroit in the middle of winter. So
we'll see. 2017 Gophers broke my heart, broke my spirit in more ways than one.
Manny, you and I, we will still convene at some point next weekend, probably sometime on Sunday, talk some college football the week that was and look ahead to the Gophers taking on Oregon. Always fun. Appreciate you doing this, and we will talk again real soon. Okay, Manny?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Row the boat, Sky Yuma, go Gophers. That's Manny Hill. I'm Ross Brendel. You have been listening and watching Gophers 101.